The lawyer's words hit me like a slap across the face. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Williams, but your daughter has filed a claim stating the inheritance rightfully belongs to her as Michael's biological mother." I looked that woman straight in the eye and said the words that would change everything. "Karen, you walked out on that boy when he was 5 years old, and now you want to profit from his death? What happened next would expose just how far some people will go for money. If you're watching this, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. Let me take you back to where this nightmare began. 3 months ago, my grandson Michael passed away suddenly from a heart attack at just 30 years old. The boy I'd raised as my own son for 25 years, the child who called me Mama Dot and never missed our Sunday dinners, was gone. While I was drowning in grief, planning his funeral, and trying to figure out how to live in a world without his laugh echoing through my house, I had no idea that the worst was yet to come. Michael had been successful. He'd built a thriving tech consulting business, owned 2 properties, and had saved diligently since his early 20s. I knew he was doing well, but I had no idea just how well until his lawyer, Mr. Patterson, called me a week after the funeral. "Mrs. Williams, I need to schedule a meeting regarding Michael's will," he'd said, his voice gentle but formal. "There are some significant assets to discuss. I'd assumed there might be enough to cover his funeral expenses and maybe a small memorial fund." Michael had always been thoughtful that way. So when I walked into Patterson's office last Tuesday morning, wearing my best black dress and carrying the leather handbag Michael had given me for my 67th birthday, I was expecting a brief, somber meeting about settling his affairs. What I wasn't expecting was to learn that my grandson had left me $2.8 million. "I'm sorry, could you repeat that?" I'd asked, certain I'd misheard. Mr. Patterson smiled kindly. $2.8 million, Mrs. Williams. The house in Riverside, the investment accounts, the business assets, and a life insurance policy. Michael was very specific in his will that everything should go to you. I sat there in stunned silence, thinking about all the times Michael had insisted on paying for dinner when we went out, how he'd quietly taken care of my car repairs and never let me reimburse him. Even in death, that sweet boy was still taking care of his Mama Dot. "He left a letter for you as well," Patterson added, sliding an envelope across his mahogany desk. Michael's handwriting was familiar, the same careful script he'd used for thank you notes as a child. "Dear Mama Dot," it began, "if you're reading this, I'm gone, and I need you to know that every good thing in my life started with you. You saved me when I was 5 years old, and you never let me forget that I was loved and wanted. This money is my way of making sure you're taken care of the way you took care of me. Do something amazing with it." I was still wiping away tears when my phone rang. Karen's name flashed on the screen. I hadn't heard from my 44-year-old daughter in over 2 years, not since she'd sent a generic Christmas card with no personal message. "Hello, Karen," I answered, wondering if she was finally calling to offer condolences. "Mom, we need to talk about Michael's will." No, hello. No, how are you holding up? No acknowledgement of the child she'd abandoned, just straight to business. That's when I knew this conversation was going to be ugly. And I was right. "I know about the money, Mom," Karen continued, her voice sharp with accusation. "Don't try to hide it from me. I have rights here." I almost laughed at the audacity. Rights? The woman who dumped her 5-year-old son on my doorstep 25 years ago and disappeared into her new life was talking about rights? "What rights would those be, Karen?" I asked, genuinely curious to hear her logic. "I'm his mother, biological mother. That has to count for something legally." The silence stretched between us as I processed this. Karen, who hadn't attended Michael's high school graduation, his college graduation, or sent so much as a birthday card in the last decade, was now claiming maternal rights over his estate. But what really got my blood boiling was realizing how she'd found out about the inheritance. "Karen, how exactly did you learn about Michael's will?" There was a pause, and I could practically hear her scrambling for an acceptable answer. I called the funeral home to ask about arrangements, and they mentioned there was a significant estate. Lie. Complete lie. I'd handled all the funeral arrangements myself, and the funeral home wouldn't discuss financial matters with someone who wasn't the next of kin. "Try again, Karen." "Fine. I saw the probate filing online. It's public record, Mom. I was checking to see if Michael had left any debts I should know about." There it was. She'd been hunting for information, probably hoping Michael had left behind problems she could swoop in and help with. Instead, she'd discovered a fortune and decided she deserved a piece of it. "You made your choice 25 years ago," I said quietly. "You chose your new husband over your son. You chose your fresh start over your responsibilities. You don't get to claim motherhood now just because there's money involved." I heard her sharp intake of breath. "That's not fair, Mom. Things were complicated back then. Brad didn't want kids, and I was young and overwhelmed. I thought Michael would be better off with you." Better off, as if abandoning your child was some kind of selfless act. I remembered that awful day clearly. Karen had shown up at my door with 5-year-old Michael clutching his stuffed dinosaur, tears streaming down his little face. "I can't do this anymore, Mom," she'd said, her suitcases already packed in her car. "Brad and I are starting fresh in Denver. We can't take Michael with us." I'd begged her to reconsider, to get counseling, to find another solution. But Karen had already made up her mind. She'd kissed Michael goodbye, promised she'd visit soon, and driven away while her son watched from my living room window, asking when Mommy was coming back. She never did visit, never called on his birthdays, never sent Christmas presents. When Michael would ask about her during those first few heartbreaking years, I'd make excuses. "Mommy's working hard to build a life so she can take care of you better," I'd tell him. Eventually, he stopped asking. "I need to see the will, Mom," Karen said now, her voice taking on that demanding tone I remembered from her teenage years. "And I want copies of all the financial documents. I'm going to contest this if I have to." Contest it. Of course she was. Because Karen had never met a situation she couldn't make worse through sheer selfishness. "You can contact Michael's lawyer directly if you want to contest anything," I told her. "His name is Robert Patterson. But Karen, I want you to think very carefully about what you're doing here. Are you really going to dishonor your son's memory by fighting over his money? Don't try to guilt me," she snapped. "This isn't about honoring anyone. This is about what's legally right. I'm his next of kin." Next of kin. The words made me sick. I was his next of kin in every way that mattered. I was the one who stayed up all night when he had pneumonia at 7. I was the one who taught him to drive, helped him with college applications, and celebrated every achievement. I was the one who held his hand in the hospital during his final moments. "You know what, Karen? Do whatever you think you need to do," I said, surprised by how calm my voice sounded. "But remember this conversation. Remember that you chose money over decency, because I'll remember it too." I hung up the phone and sat in my quiet kitchen, looking around at all the little reminders of Michael's presence. And for the first time since this whole mess started, I felt something other than grief. I felt angry. Good. Because Dorothy Williams had learned a long time ago that sometimes anger was exactly what you needed to fight back. 2 days later, Karen showed up at my front door without warning. I was still in my gardening clothes, dirt under my fingernails from planting the memorial rosebush for Michael, when the doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw my daughter standing on my porch, looking exactly like she had 25 years ago when she'd brought trouble to my doorstep. "Hello, Karen," I said, opening the door but not inviting her in. She looked good, I had to admit. Expensive highlights, designer purse, manicured nails. Clearly, life in Denver had treated her well. "Can I come in? We need to talk." "About what?" "About Michael. About the will. About doing what's right." What's right? I almost choked on that one, but I stepped aside and let her into my living room, the same room where Michael had taken his first steps, where we'd watched countless Disney movies together, where he'd told me about his first girlfriend and his dreams of starting his own business. Karen looked around with barely concealed distaste. "You never changed anything," she observed. "The same furniture, same paint, same everything." "Some things don't need changing," I replied. "Some things are perfect just the way they are." She missed the dig entirely, settling onto my old sofa like she owned the place. "Mom, let's be reasonable here," she began, crossing her legs and folding her hands in her lap. The gesture reminded me painfully of Michael when he was nervous. "I know you're grieving, and I know this is hard, but we both know that Michael's will doesn't reflect what he would have really wanted if he'd thought things through properly." I blinked slowly, letting her words sink in. "Excuse me? Think about it logically. He was young. He wasn't expecting to die. If he'd really considered the implications, he would have wanted his biological family to inherit his estate. It's only natural. Natural. Like abandoning your child was natural, like showing up 25 years later with your hand out was natural. I studied my daughter's face, looking for any sign of genuine grief, any hint that she was mourning the son she'd lost. All I saw was calculation. "Karen, let me ask you something," I said, settling into my recliner, the one Michael had bought me for Mother's Day 3 years ago. "When was the last time you spoke to Michael?" Her composure slipped slightly. "What does that matter?" "It matters because you're sitting in my living room claiming to know what he would have wanted, and I'm trying to figure out how you'd know that when you haven't been part of his life." "I sent Christmas cards," she said defensively, "and I followed his social media. I knew what was going on in his life. Christmas cards. Generic ones with her signature and nothing else. And following someone's social media wasn't the same as being present for the moments that mattered." "Did you know he was afraid of thunderstorms until he was 12? I asked quietly. "Did you know he played piano beautifully, but quit lessons because he was too shy to perform? Did you know he volunteered at the animal shelter every Saturday morning for the last 5 years? Karen's jaw tightened. "Those are just details, Mom. Details. That's what she called the fabric of her son's life. The 1,000 small moments that made him who he was were just details to her. No, Karen. Those details were Michael's life, the life you chose not to be part of. And now you want to profit from that life you abandoned." She stood up abruptly, her careful composure finally cracking. "I was 19 years old when he was born. I was a child myself. I did what I thought was best for everyone." "You did what was easiest for you," I corrected. "There's a difference." "Fine," she said, her voice cold now. "If you won't be reasonable about this, I'll let the lawyers handle it. But don't expect this to be simple, Mom. I'm not going away." After she left, I sat in my quiet house and thought about Michael at 19. He'd been in his 2nd year of college, working part-time to help with expenses, calling me every Sunday without fail. Even as a teenager, he'd understood responsibility in a way his biological mother never had. And now she wanted to claim his legacy over my dead body. The legal papers arrived by certified mail 3 days later. Karen was officially contesting Michael's will on the grounds of inadequate consideration of biological family relationships and undue influence by a non-parental guardian. I read those words sitting at my kitchen table with my morning coffee, and I, honest to God, laughed out loud. Undue influence. As if loving a child unconditionally and being there for every scraped knee, every broken heart, and every triumph was somehow manipulative. As if 25 years of showing up was a con game designed to steal an inheritance. I called Mr. Patterson immediately. "Mrs. Williams," he said, his voice warm with recognition. "I've been expecting your call." "Yes, we received Ms. Bennett's filing. I have to ask, are you surprised by this development?" "Surprised? No. Disappointed in humanity? Absolutely." Patterson chuckled softly. "I've been practicing family law for 30 years. Mrs. Williams, unfortunately, money has a way of bringing out the worst in people. But I want to assure you, Michael's will is ironclad. His wishes were very clear, and he was of sound mind when he made these decisions." "What exactly is Karen claiming?" I asked, though I dreaded the answer. "She's arguing that Michael's estrangement from his biological mother was the result of your interference, and that his decision to leave his estate to you was made under emotional duress caused by your prolonged manipulation of his relationship with her." I set my coffee cup down carefully, afraid I might throw it. Manipulation. Right. Because raising a child and loving them is manipulation. "Mrs. Williams, I need you to understand something. These are serious allegations, even though they're completely baseless. We'll need to gather documentation to support our defense." Documentation. Evidence that I'd been a good grandmother. Proof that Karen had abandoned her son. It felt surreal, having to justify 25 years of love and sacrifice to strangers in suits. "What kind of documentation?" "School records showing you as his primary guardian. Medical records with your name as emergency contact. Financial records showing your support of his education and activities. Any communication from Karen during his childhood that demonstrates her absence from his life. Communication from Karen." That would be a short file. A handful of Christmas cards with no personal messages. 2 birthday cards in 25 years. One awkward phone call when Michael was 16 that lasted less than 5 minutes because she didn't know what to say to him. "Mr. Patterson, I need to ask you something, and I want you to be completely honest with me. What are our chances here?" There was a pause. "Mrs. Williams, in cases like this, biological parents do have certain legal advantages, even when they've been absent. However, Michael was an adult when he made his will. He was 30 years old, financially independent, and completely capable of making his own decisions about his estate. But Karen's lawyers will argue that the parental relationship was damaged by your interference, and that Michael's decision was based on incomplete information about his mother's circumstances. They'll try to paint a picture of a young mother who made a difficult sacrifice for her child's benefit, only to be systematically excluded from his life. A difficult sacrifice." I wanted to scream. Karen's sacrifice had been choosing her new husband over her existing child. Her sacrifice had been walking away from responsibility so she could start fresh without the inconvenience of motherhood. "What do we do?" I asked. "We fight," Patterson said simply. "We document the truth. We show the court exactly who raised Michael Williams and who abandoned him. And we trust that justice will prevail. Justice. In my experience, justice was a luxury that most people couldn't afford. But I had Michael's inheritance now, which meant I could afford the best lawyers money could buy. And if Karen wanted a fight, I was going to give her one she'd never forget. Because she'd made one crucial mistake in all of this. She'd underestimated Dorothy Williams. Again. The first blow came when Karen's lawyer requested access to my financial records going back 25 years. Not just recent records, but every bank statement, every tax return, every financial transaction I'd made since becoming Michael's guardian. "They're fishing," Patterson explained during our meeting in his office. "Looking for any evidence that you benefited financially from raising Michael." Benefited financially. I nearly laughed. I'd worked double shifts at the hospital for years to afford Michael's baseball equipment, his school supplies, his college fund. I'd driven the same beat-up Honda for 15 years because every spare penny went toward his needs. If they wanted to see where my money went, they were welcome to look. "Let them have the records," I told Patterson. "I've got nothing to hide." "Are you sure, Mrs. Williams? This level of financial scrutiny can be quite invasive." "I'm absolutely sure. In fact, I hope they look real close at those records, because what they're going to find is a woman who spent 25 years putting a child's needs before her own." But Karen wasn't done. 3 days later, she showed up at Michael's old workplace, introducing herself to his colleagues as his estranged mother and asking questions about his relationship with me. She was building a case, painting a picture of an old woman who'd poisoned her grandson against his biological mother. I found out about it when Michael's former business partner, David, called me. "Mrs. Williams, I thought you should know. A woman came by the office today claiming to be Michael's mother. She was asking some pretty pointed questions about your relationship with him." "What kind of questions?" "Whether he ever seemed resentful about his childhood, whether he ever mentioned wanting to reconnect with his biological family, whether you seemed controlling or possessive." My blood boiled. Karen was trying to rewrite history, to plant seeds of doubt about my motives and Michael's feelings. "David, I hope you told her the truth." "I absolutely did. I told her that Michael talked about you constantly, that he credited you with everything good in his life, and that anyone who knew him could see how much he loved and respected you." That evening, I sat in Michael's old room, surrounded by the evidence of our life together. Photo albums full of birthday parties, school plays, graduation ceremonies, family vacations, awards and certificates bearing his name, report cards with teacher comments praising his kindness and character. This was the real story of Michael Williams. Not the fantasy Karen was trying to create. I picked up one particular photo, taken when Michael was 8 years old. We were at the county fair, both grinning at the camera, his small hand firmly clasped in mine. He'd insisted on riding the Ferris wheel, even though he was scared of heights, and I'd held him close the entire time, whispering encouragement in his ear. That's when I noticed something in the background of the photo. Karen's former neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, no relation to the lawyer, was visible near the game booths. She'd been there that day because her granddaughter was in Michael's class. She'd seen us together, seen how happy and secure Michael was with me, More importantly, she'd also witnessed Karen's visits during those early years. The few times Karen had actually shown up, usually unannounced and often at inconvenient times, Mrs. Patterson had been there. She'd seen Karen's awkward interactions with Michael, her impatience with his childish needs, her obvious discomfort with motherhood. I picked up my phone and dialed information. If Karen wanted to play dirty, she was about to learn that I knew how to fight back, because I wasn't just defending myself anymore. I was defending Michael's memory and his wishes. And some battles are worth whatever they cost, Mrs. Patterson answered on the third ring, her voice as sharp and clear as I remembered. "Dorothy Williams, my goodness, it's been years. How are you, dear?" "I'm fighting for my grandson's legacy, Mrs. Patterson, and I need your help." Mrs. Patterson didn't just remember Karen's visits. She'd apparently been documenting them in her diary for years. "I always thought that daughter of yours was trouble," she told me over tea in her living room the next afternoon. The way she'd show up demanding to see Michael, then act annoyed when he was actually excited to see her, and the things she'd say about you when she thought no one was listening. My heart clenched. "What things?" "Oh, honey. She used to complain to her friend Brad on the phone right there in her front yard, loud enough for the whole neighborhood to hear, saying you were too attached to Michael, that you were making it hard for her to have a relationship with him, as if it was your fault she couldn't be bothered to call her own son." Mrs. Patterson pulled out a worn journal, its pages yellowed with age. I started writing things down after the third or fourth visit. Something about the whole situation didn't sit right with me. A mother should want to spend time with her child, not treat it like an obligation. She opened to a page dated June 15th, 1998. In careful handwriting, she'd recorded, "Karen Bennett visited today, stayed 45 minutes. Spent most of the time on her phone with husband while Michael tried to show her his school project. Left early saying she had dinner plans. Michael cried after she drove away." Entry after entry detailed the same pattern. Karen showing up sporadically, interacting with Michael half-heartedly, then leaving him confused and disappointed. The visits had become less frequent over the years until they stopped altogether when Michael was 12. "There's more," Mrs. Patterson said, flipping to entries from 2001. "She came by one last time when Michael was about 11. I heard her arguing with you in your front yard." I remembered that day vividly. Karen had shown up demanding I encourage Michael to call her more often, accusing me of turning him against her. I quote here, "This isn't working, Mom. He doesn't even want to talk to me anymore. Maybe it would be better if I just stayed away until he's older and can understand the situation better." Mrs. Patterson looked up at me. "You told her that if she walked away again, she shouldn't expect him to be waiting when she decided to come back." "I did say that," I admitted. I was tired of watching her break his heart over and over again. "Well, you were right. She left that day and didn't come back for 8 years. And when she finally did show up, it was for his high school graduation. She stayed for the ceremony and left immediately after, didn't even congratulate him personally." I closed my eyes, remembering Michael's face that day. He'd scanned the crowd looking for Karen, hope written all over his features. When he'd spotted her leaving early, his shoulders had sagged with disappointment. He'd never mentioned it, but I'd seen the hurt in his eyes. "Mrs. Patterson, would you be willing to testify about what you witnessed?" She straightened in her chair, her eyes flashing with determination. "Honey, I'd be honored to tell a judge exactly what kind of mother Karen Bennett was. That boy deserved better, and you gave it to him." That evening, I called Patterson with the news about Mrs. Patterson's testimony. "This is excellent, Mrs. Williams. Eyewitness testimony from a neutral party will be very compelling. But I have to warn you, Karen's team has been busy too. They've filed a motion claiming Michael suffered from depression and anxiety that affected his judgment when making his will." My blood ran cold. "That's a lie. Michael was happy, successful, well-adjusted. I know that, and you know that. But they're going to argue that his mental state was compromised by the trauma of maternal abandonment, and that his decision-making was impaired as a result. It was brilliant in its cruelty. Karen was claiming that her own abandonment of Michael had damaged him so severely that he couldn't make rational decisions about his estate. She was using her failures as a mother as evidence that Michael's will should be overturned. Can they do that? I asked. They can try, but we have evidence of Michael's success, his stable relationships, his sound business decisions. We can prove he was mentally competent when he made his will. What happens next? Next week, we go to court, and we show the judge exactly who Michael Williams really was and who raised him to be that man. As I hung up the phone, I realized that Karen had miscalculated badly. She thought she could waltz in after 25 years and claim Michael's legacy based on biology alone. But she'd forgotten something important. Michael had been loved, truly and completely, for his entire life, and love leaves evidence. Tomorrow, the real battle would begin. The courthouse smelled like disappointment and broken promises. I sat in the front row wearing my best navy suit, the one Michael had helped me pick out for his college graduation, while Karen's lawyer painted me as a manipulative old woman who'd stolen a child's love for financial gain. Mrs. Williams systematically alienated Michael from his biological mother, he declared, gesturing dramatically. She poisoned a young child's mind against the woman who gave him life. I watched the judge's face carefully, looking for any sign of what she was thinking. Judge Morrison was about my age, with sharp eyes and graying hair pulled back in a neat bun. She'd been listening to this nonsense for 2 hours without showing much emotion, but I caught her glancing at me when Karen's lawyer claimed I'd exploited Michael's vulnerability for personal enrichment. Personal enrichment. Right. Because working double shifts to afford his piano lessons was exploitation. Because saving every penny for his college fund was manipulation. Because loving a scared little boy unconditionally was somehow a long-term con game. The audacity of these people never ceased to amaze me. When it was our turn, Patterson stood up with quiet confidence. Your Honor, we're going to show you exactly what kind of relationship Michael Williams had with both women in his life. Not through speculation or creative storytelling, but through documented evidence spanning 25 years. He started with Michael's school records. Every emergency contact form listed me. Every parent-teacher conference was attended by me. Every school play, every science fair, every graduation ceremony. I was there, and Karen wasn't. Mrs. Williams didn't just raise Michael, Patterson explained. She was his constant, his champion, his safe harbor in every storm. Then came the financial records. Karen's lawyer had wanted to see where my money went. Well, now everyone could see. 25 years of receipts, bank statements, and canceled checks that told the real story. Music lessons, sports equipment, summer camps, tutoring, medical bills, college tuition. Every penny accounted for, every dollar spent on making Michael's life better. But the real bombshell came when Patterson called Mrs. Patterson to the stand. At 81, she walked to the witness box with the dignity of someone who'd seen enough nonsense to last 3 lifetimes. Her testimony was devastating in its simplicity. She described Karen's sporadic visits, her obvious discomfort with motherhood, her complaints about being expected to act like a parent. The child would be so excited when she came, Mrs. Patterson said, her voice clear and strong. He'd wait by the window for hours before she arrived, and then she'd spend the whole visit checking her watch, taking phone calls, making excuses to leave early. That poor boy learned to stop expecting much from her. I saw Karen flinch when Mrs. Patterson described the last visit, when Michael was 11. I heard Karen tell Dorothy that maybe it would be better if she just stayed away until Michael was older. She was tired of pretending to be interested in his life. The courtroom was dead silent. Karen's face had gone pale, her lawyer frantically scribbling notes. But then Judge Morrison asked the question I'd been dreading. Mrs. Patterson, in your opinion, did Mrs. Williams ever discourage Michael from having a relationship with his mother? Mrs. Patterson looked directly at me, then at Karen, then back at the judge. Your Honor, Dorothy Williams bent over backwards to help that child maintain hope for his mother's love. She made excuses for Karen's behavior, helped Michael write letters that went unanswered, and encouraged him to call on birthdays and holidays. If anything, she enabled Karen's neglect by protecting Michael from the full truth of his mother's indifference. The silence that followed was deafening. And for the first time since this whole nightmare began, I allowed myself to hope that maybe, just maybe, justice might actually prevail. The second day of testimony brought character witnesses. Michael's business partner, David, took the stand first, describing a man who was generous, thoughtful, and deeply grateful for his upbringing. Michael talked about his grandmother constantly, David testified. He called her his hero, his inspiration, the person who taught him everything important about life. Then came Michael's college roommate, his neighbor, his pastor. One by one, they painted a picture of a man who was proud of his relationship with me, who spoke of me with deep affection and respect. Not one of them had ever heard Michael express resentment about his childhood or regret about his mother's absence. But Karen's team wasn't giving up. They called Dr. Elena Rodriguez, a psychologist who specialized in abandonment trauma. Children who experience maternal abandonment often develop complicated psychological defenses, she explained in clinical terms that made my skin crawl. They may idealize their primary caregiver while rejecting their biological parent as a form of self-protection. Self-protection. As if Michael's love for me was some kind of psychological disorder rather than the natural result of 25 years of mutual devotion. Dr. Rodriguez had never met Michael, never spoken to him, never observed our relationship, but apparently her textbook theories were supposed to override the testimony of people who'd actually known him. In your professional opinion, Karen's lawyer asked, could Michael's decision to exclude his biological mother from his will have been influenced by unresolved abandonment trauma? Absolutely, Dr. Rodriguez replied without hesitation. Adult children of abandonment often make decisions designed to punish the absent parent, even when those decisions aren't in their own best interest. I wanted to stand up and scream. Michael's will wasn't about punishing Karen. It was about honoring the person who'd actually been present for his life. But I forced myself to stay calm, to trust in Patterson's plan. And when it was our turn for cross-examination, Patterson destroyed Dr. Rodriguez's credibility with surgical precision. Doctor, you never met Michael Williams, correct? Correct. You never interviewed anyone who knew him personally? No. But I reviewed the case files and you reviewed legal documents prepared by lawyers, not medical or psychological evaluations of the actual person in question? That's correct, but so your entire testimony is based on theoretical assumptions about a man you never met, who died before you were even involved in this case. I'm applying established psychological principles to the available evidence. Patterson smiled coldly. Doctor, are you aware that Michael Williams volunteered weekly at a children's shelter, that he mentored troubled teenagers, that he donated anonymously to several charities focused on family reunification? Dr. Rodriguez shifted uncomfortably. I wasn't aware of those specifics. Are those the actions of someone consumed by abandonment trauma and motivated by revenge against his biological mother? The psychologist had no good answer for that. Because Michael's life had been defined by love and generosity, not trauma and resentment. He'd been shaped by my values, not damaged by Karen's absence. And slowly, I could see the jury recognizing that truth. But then Karen herself took the stand, and I realized the real battle was just beginning. Because my daughter had always been good at playing the victim, and 25 years of practice had only made her better. Karen's performance on the witness stand was masterful. She dressed carefully in a simple black dress, minimal makeup, her hair pulled back in a modest style that made her look younger and more vulnerable than her 44 years. When her lawyer asked about giving up Michael, actual tears appeared in her eyes. I was 19 when Michael was born, she said, her voice trembling with perfectly calculated emotion. His father had already abandoned us, and I was working 2 jobs just to afford our tiny apartment. When I met Brad, he offered me stability, security, a chance to build a real life, but he couldn't take on someone else's child. Someone else's child. Not my son or Michael, but someone else's child. As if Michael had been a piece of furniture she couldn't fit in her new apartment. But Karen wasn't done with her sob story. I thought Michael would be better off with my mother, she continued, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. She had a stable home, financial security, time to devote to raising a child properly. I was barely more than a child myself. I made what I thought was the best decision for everyone. The jury was eating it up. I could see it in their faces. The sympathy, the understanding for a young mother who'd made a difficult choice. They were buying her narrative that giving up Michael had been an act of selfless love rather than selfish convenience. Did you want to maintain contact with Michael? Her lawyer asked gently. Of course I did. He was my son, but every time I tried to visit, it became more difficult. My mother had created this perfect little world for him, and I felt like an intruder. Michael would be polite but distant, like he was uncomfortable with me being there. Uncomfortable. Yes, Michael had been uncomfortable. Uncomfortable watching his mother check her phone constantly. Uncomfortable with her obvious eagerness to leave. Uncomfortable with her awkward attempts at conversation with a child she barely knew. But Karen was spinning his discomfort as evidence of my interference. I realized I was disrupting his stability, she said, the tears flowing freely now. So I made the painful decision to step back and let him have the peaceful childhood he deserved. I thought maybe when he was older, when he could understand the complexity of the situation, we could rebuild our relationship. It was beautiful, really. She'd turned 25 years of neglect into a touching story of maternal sacrifice. She'd transformed her abandonment into an act of love. And when her lawyer asked if she'd ever stopped loving Michael, her answer was perfect. Never. Not for a single day. He was always in my heart, always in my thoughts. I just wanted him to be happy. I felt sick. This wasn't the Karen I knew, the one who'd complained about the burden of motherhood, who'd chosen her new life over her existing child without looking back. This was a carefully crafted performance designed to tug at heartstrings and rewrite history. But Patterson was ready for cross-examination, and he had weapons Karen didn't know about. Ms. Bennett, you mentioned wanting to maintain contact with Michael. How many times did you call him during his childhood? Karen hesitated. It's hard to remember exactly. Several times. Let me help refresh your memory. According to phone records we subpoenaed, you called Michael exactly 3 times between 1999 and 2015. 3 times in 16 years. The courtroom went silent. Karen's composure cracked slightly. I sent cards and letters. Yes, you did. We have copies. 12 Christmas cards over 25 years, all store-bought with only your signature. No personal messages, no questions about his life, no expressions of love. Is that your idea of staying in touch with your son? Karen was crumbling now, her carefully constructed image falling apart under Patterson's relentless questioning. You said you stepped back to give Michael stability, but isn't it true that you stopped visiting because your new husband didn't want Michael in your life? That's not. Brad wasn't. We have your neighbor's testimony, Ms. Bennett. She heard you tell your husband that you were done playing mother to someone else's kid. Were those your words? The devastation on Karen's face was complete. She'd been caught in her lies, exposed for what she really was. But then she played her final card, the one I should have seen coming. I may not have been the perfect mother, she said, her voice breaking with genuine emotion now. But I gave Michael life. And Dorothy took that life and made it her own. She stole my son from me, and now she's trying to steal his legacy too. And with those words, I realized this fight was far from over. The bombshell came during Karen's redirect examination. Her lawyer had one more card to play, and it was a doozy. Ms. Bennett, there's been testimony about your mother's financial support of Michael throughout his childhood. Did you ever contribute financially to his care? Karen straightened in her chair, and I saw something calculating flash in her eyes. Yes, I did, she said firmly. I sent money every month for the first 10 years of Michael's life. $500 a month, without fail. $60,000 total over those years. My blood turned to ice. That was a lie, a complete fabrication. I'd never received a penny from Karen for Michael's care. Do you have records of these payments? Her lawyer asked. Of course, money orders sent through the postal service. I kept copies of everything. She reached into her purse and pulled out a manila envelope. I brought them with me today. Patterson was on his feet immediately. Objection, Your Honor. This evidence wasn't disclosed during discovery. Your Honor, Karen's lawyer replied smoothly. My client only recently located these records while preparing for testimony. They were stored in her late mother-in-law's belongings. Judge Morrison examined the documents with a frown. I'll allow them into evidence, but I want both parties to have time to examine them thoroughly. We'll recess for 1 hour. In the hallway outside the courtroom, Patterson spread the money order copies across a table. At first glance, they looked legitimate. Each one made out to Dorothy Williams for $500, each one bearing what appeared to be Karen's signature. The dates spanned from 1999 to 2009, just as she'd claimed. "These are fake," I told Patterson firmly. "I never received any of this money. Not $1. "I believe you, Mrs. Williams. But these documents look authentic. We need to prove they're fraudulent, and we need to do it quickly." That's when I noticed something. The address on each money order was wrong. Not completely wrong, but subtly wrong. My street number was listed as 1247 instead of 1274. A simple transposition that would have caused any mail to be returned to sender. "Look at the address," I told Patterson excitedly. She deliberately used the wrong address so the money orders would be returned to her uncashed. She could keep the receipts as proof she sent money while knowing I'd never actually receive it. Patterson's eyes lit up. "That's brilliant. Evil, but brilliant. She's been planning this fraud for 25 years, creating fake evidence of financial support that never actually happened. We had 1 hour to prove it. 1 hour to expose Karen's decades-long deception before the court. But I knew someone who could help us. Mrs. Patterson had lived across the street from me for 40 years. If Karen had really been sending me money orders regularly, surely our eagle-eyed neighbor would have noticed postal workers attempting deliveries to the wrong address. Patterson made the call while I paced the hallway. "Mrs. Patterson? This is Robert Patterson, Dorothy Williams' attorney. I need to ask you about mail delivery to Mrs. Williams' address during the 1990s. "I see. Yes, that's very helpful. Would you be willing to testify about that this afternoon?" When he hung up, Patterson was grinning. "Mrs. Patterson says the postal worker on that route was her nephew Danny. He worked that route for 20 years, and he specifically remembers attempting deliveries to 1247 Maple Street multiple times during the 1990s. There's no such address. It's a vacant lot. He had to return dozens of pieces of mail marked address unknown. We had her. Karen had spent 25 years creating fake evidence of parental support, building a paper trail designed to support her eventual claim on Michael's estate. She'd planned this long before Michael died, probably from the moment she learned he was successful. But when we returned to court and Patterson called Danny Patterson to the stand, Karen's lawyer objected vehemently. "Your Honor, this witness wasn't disclosed during discovery either. Neither were your client's fraudulent money orders," Patterson replied coldly. Judge Morrison made her decision quickly. "I'll allow the testimony. This case has taken some unusual turns, and I want all relevant evidence presented." And with that ruling, Karen's house of lies came tumbling down. Danny Patterson's testimony was devastating. "I remember those money orders," he said, his voice clear and confident. "Same sender, same amount, same wrong address, every month for years. I tried to deliver them maybe a dozen times before I realized there was no 1247 Maple Street. After that, I just marked them return to sender and sent them back." "And did you ever successfully deliver money orders from Karen Bennett to 1274 Maple Street, Mrs. Williams' actual address?" Patterson asked. "Never. Not once in 20 years. Karen's face had gone white. Her lawyer was frantically whispering in her ear. But the damage was done. But that wasn't the end of it. Patterson had one more surprise, one final revelation that would seal Karen's fate forever. Earlier that week, while preparing for trial, he'd been going through Michael's personal effects more thoroughly and had discovered something that changed everything. "Your Honor, during our preparation for this case, we discovered additional evidence among Michael's belongings. Michael kept detailed records of his business dealings, including recordings of important conversations for his protection. One of these recordings is directly relevant to this matter." Patterson approached the bench with a small digital recorder I recognized immediately. Michael's voice recorder, the one he'd used for business meetings and important calls. This recording was made 6 months before Michael's death, during a conversation with his estate planning attorney about updating his will. The judge allowed the recording to be played, and suddenly Michael's voice filled the courtroom. Clear, strong, unmistakably him. "I want to make sure everything goes to Mama Dot if something happens to me. She's the only real parent I've ever had. My biological mother, Karen Bennett. She's reached out a few times over the years asking for money, but I've never had any relationship with her." The recording continued. "Karen claimed she used to send support payments when I was a kid, but Mama Dot never got any money from her. Not a cent. I think she was lying, trying to make herself look better. I don't have any relationship with Karen Bennett, and I don't want her to have any claim on my estate. She made her choice 25 years ago when she walked away. Mama Dot made hers when she stayed. But the most damning part came next. I've saved copies of every letter, every email, every text message Karen has sent me over the years, most of them asking for money or trying to justify her abandonment. I want my attorney to have all of this documentation so there's no question about my wishes if anything happens to me. The silence in the courtroom was absolute. Karen was crying now, real tears this time, but they weren't tears of grief or regret. They were tears of rage and frustration. Her carefully constructed fraud had just been demolished by her own son's voice from beyond the grave. Patterson then presented a file folder containing years of communication between Karen and Michael that none of us had known existed. Letters asking for loans, emails making excuses for her absence, text messages that revealed the true nature of their non-relationship. Michael had been documenting everything, creating a record that would eventually protect his legacy from the very person who'd abandoned him. Judge Morrison didn't need to deliberate long. Based on the evidence presented, including clear documentation of fraud in the matter of alleged support payments, I find that Michael Williams will accurately reflect his wishes and was made with full mental capacity. Furthermore, I'm referring this matter to the district attorney for investigation of potential perjury charges. The estate will be distributed according to Michael's explicit instructions, with all assets going to Mrs. Dorothy Williams. As the gavel fell, I felt something I hadn't experienced since Michael's death. Peace. Not just victory, but genuine peace. My grandson's wishes had been honored, his memory protected, his legacy preserved exactly as he'd intended. Karen left the courtroom without looking at me. Her dreams of easy money shattered along with any remaining shred of dignity. She'd gambled everything on her ability to manipulate the system, to play the victim, and rewrite history in her favor. But the truth has a way of surfacing eventually, and Michael's truth was stronger than her lies. 3 months later, I used part of Michael's inheritance to establish the Michael Williams Foundation for Children in Foster Care. It provides educational scholarships and support services for kids who, like Michael, have been abandoned by their biological parents, but found love with guardians who chose to stay. At the Foundation's opening ceremony, I thought about how Michael would have loved seeing children get the chances he'd worked so hard to create for himself. And I smiled, knowing that his final gift to me had become my first gift to the world in his memory. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all, isn't? Sometimes it's just living well and loving deeply, letting your actions speak louder than your anger. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, justice actually does prevail. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and feel free to share your story in the comments. Your voice matters.